as a defiant Europe firmly draws a red line for Trump. Which NATO nation wants to join US-Israel's war against Iran? Is a desperate NATO ally actively pushing a divided Europe to join Trump's Iran war to help Ukraine? Macron angrily calls the war reckless, but a key NATO ally boldly toes a completely different line. Is a panicked Ukraine deeply worried of losing out on vital US backing if this Iran war continues? While Donald Trump's primary Europe allies clearly distance themselves from waging war against Iran, one particular NATO nation is currently towing a completely different strategic line. Finland has reportedly increasingly emerged as the lone distinct pro-war diplomatic voice currently operating within the European political bloc. Finnish President Alexander Stub heavily pushed for the EU to actively join the ongoing US and Israel's destructive war launched against Iran. President Stub reportedly explicitly said today that various nations who genuinely can assist by actively joining the US fighting in war against Iran definitively must do so. Stub told Bloomberg reporters that capable countries genuinely equipped with adequate military capacity strictly to help the United States will definitely do exactly that. Stub candidly admitted his diplomatic backing for the Iran war is almost entirely motivated primarily by Ukraine's ongoing conflict with Russia, reported RT. The Finland president forcefully alleged the escalating US-Israel war waged against Iran heavily diverted critical American military resources away from Kiev.
I have no illusions about who can convince President Trump on anything, and especially I don't. If I get one idea out of 10 in on Ukraine, I think it's good. On Ukraine, I think the implications of the war in Iran are negative on Ukraine, mainly because of the oil price, which feeds the Russian war machinery. The Russian economy was actually doing extremely badly a couple of weeks back. Now it's bouncing back. It's also taking some of the necessary air defense systems away from where they should be in Ukraine. I think public sources talk about 500 to 600 having been used in 4 years in Ukraine, and already now 800 to 1,000 being used in the Middle East and the Gulf region. And also it takes the focus away, I think, from the peace negotiations in Ukraine. So I hope that the peace negotiations on Ukraine don't collapse like the negotiations between Iran and the US did. But time will tell.
The serving Finland president furthermore suggested a potential geopolitical quid pro quo negotiated with Trump directly for helping Ukraine may potentially work, reported RT. Stub was specifically asked today if the EU should immediately send deployed naval forces strictly to the Hormuz Strait in exchange for securing Kiev defensive guarantees. Alexander Stub quickly said he would carefully consider evaluating the complex strategic proposal, according to an RT report. Ukraine President Zelensky also previously offered to directly help various Gulf nations explicitly in exchange for securing increased US military backing. Ukraine recently sent a specialized military drone team directly to Jordan, but Donald Trump later abruptly said he absolutely didn't need Zelensky's offered help. In addition, numerous EU nations have recently come publicly out offering only minimal political support specifically for Trump's expanding regional war waged against Iran. Earlier, Trump had aggressively threatened the NATO alliance to actively help physically unblock the strategic Strait of Hormuz directly alongside the US military. Powerful nations France, Germany, and Poland came out publicly against authorizing military involvement in the ongoing US-Israel's war fought with Iran. On March 19th, French President Emmanuel Macron strongly condemned Israel's highly destructive military strikes executed on Iran's massive South Pars offshore gas field. Macron fiercely accused the US and Israel of essentially being completely reckless and urgently urged all combatants to come back into their senses.
The third topic we will discuss is obviously the situation in the Middle East, first with a discussion with Secretary General Guterres, which will allow us to also revisit the humanitarian situation in Gaza, which we must not forget and for which we must remain mobilized. And then we will obviously advocate for de-escalation and a return to stability in the Middle East. I would like to say here that yesterday, I had the opportunity to speak with the Emir of Qatar, who has been directly affected, and the gas production capacities have been hit. Several other Gulf countries were hit for the first time on their production capacity, in the same way that Iran was hit in the morning. This escalation is reckless. I was then able to speak with President Trump yesterday, and he, during the night, himself called for a halt to all these bombings and attacks on civilian infrastructure, gas, oil, but also water. And I want to say here, we support the idea of a moratorium on the infrastructure civilians, the civilian people in this conflict, and a rapid de-escalation. And as the region enters a period of religious holidays, I think that everyone should calm down and the fighting should stop at least for a few days to try to give negotiations a chance. And this is an absolutely key point, also, on our agenda. And so France advocates, as always, the return to negotiation, the return to dialogue, and de-escalation in the region. This is what we are going to talk about. As you know, it does not depend on us. We are committed. We are discussing, but we did not launch these strikes and we are not, obviously, involved. We are involved in the defense of the countries that are affected when we have peace agreements, simply in a defensive manner. I hope that, in any case, everyone will come to their senses, because all of this, obviously, has an impact on all the countries that are affected. It has an impact on the global market. We know that since the beginning of this war, the prices of gas and oil have increased, because we are talking about 20% of what supplies the global market passing through Hormuz. But if the production capacities themselves are destroyed, there will be a much more lasting impact from this war. So we will continue to mobilize. And obviously we have also conveyed this message to the Iranians. And I wish. That's why there should be direct discussions that can be established between Americans and Iranians on this point.
$25 करोड़ गरीब गरीबी को परास्त करके बाहर निकले।
For the good of our nation, let's work together and let's truly make America great again.
The fastest news breaks.
Requested PM saying that we will have to speak to Putin and to Zelensky.
The biggest newsmakers.
The relationship with India is probably the most important bilateral relationship the U.S. will have for the rest of this century.
The capital delivered quite an election result today.
Expert analysis.
The million-dollar question today is how to stop this dance of death.
Ground reports.
I'm standing at the crossroad of the Kumbh Mela. Behind me are more than 100 entry ghats.
Long-form interviews.
Exclusionary politics is reflected in Manipur case as well. You don't bother because this is a small state.
Deep dive into burning issues.
It's often said DRC could be the richest country in the whole world. It's because of what sits underneath.
Why exactly did the US topple the Sheikh Hasina government?
HT videos. We don't just break news, we break it down.